Hey everyone, Xygor here. As you all may know, Diablo 4 has finally been released, and right now, as we speak, it's being played by millions of gamers. And I'm no exception. I've been having a blast playing my Whirlwind Barbarian, and I'm going to be playing it into the foreseeable future. In many ways, it's actually what I expected Diablo 3 to be upon its release. But that being said, I wouldn't be a true Blizzard fan if I wasn't also a professional complainer. So in this video, I'm going to express the 7 things that Blizzard must do right now to improve Diablo 4, to fix it to make a good game truly great. So let's get right into it. Number 7, Blizzard absolutely has to add social gameplay functionality. Because right now, check this out. Here's what you have for social. You have a social menu item in the UI that shows your friends list. Ooh, whoa, look at that. And it also shows local players, right? So I guess the idea is you could go through this list of local players and, right click and invite them to a party to do something with them. But the problem is you don't know what the heck these players want to do. For all we know, they could be wanting to stare at vendor rare items all day and do trade skilling and crafting all day. So we don't really have an impression of what they're after. You can also click on clan. Wow. What I would really like to see is a functionality similar to what Diablo 3 brought, where you have a selector that allows you to form automatic groups of 4 players, or it could be lower, that want to do the same things you do. So it could be Helltides, it could be Nightmare Dungeons, it could even be people grouping together to complete their capstone dungeons. There needs to be a simple to use UI for that. Diablo 3 did this very well. And granted, it took them a few years, I think, to implement that, but that's really what I would like to see out of a polished Diablo game, because right now, it's basically an experience where you kind of have a fake multiplayer game. You see these people around here, they're running around with you, they can fight the world boss with you, but other than that, you don't really interact with them in any way. I guess you can emote with them, but you don't know what their intentions are, and social gameplay functionality that puts you in a group to do like-minded things is the way to go. It has to happen. Number 6, expand stash space and consumable space. So right now, if you have a fully loaded stash, you only have 4 stash tabs. So as you can see, I have mine almost totally filled up. One of them is taken up by a lot of uniques. One of them I have items that I think might be deserving of enchants in the future, and this one is for future aspects. So that's the thing that this game is based around, is extracting legendary aspects, putting them on your rares. And these aspects can roll in various ways, whereupon you'll want to save sometimes 1 or 2 aspects. So if you get like a really GG great item, then you can know that you can put on your best aspect. But if the item isn't so great, you might want to put a slightly less one on it. So what this is forcing players to do is really make tough decisions about what to put in their stash. Also, it's not intuitive. Basically, there's no search functionality whatsoever. There's no very easy way to discern various items from each other by kind of item power level and things like that. You really just have to mouse over each and every single one to even see the aspect in the first place. There just isn't enough stash space, and it's not intuitive. But even above that, I think consumable space is an even bigger problem, because right now, you're incentivized to load up on various different elixirs that provide bonuses in addition to a 5% EXP bonus. And these are very situational. So if the game wants you to be thrown into multiple different dungeons with varying powers and different enemies, you really need to have a variety of elixirs all at the same time. Otherwise, you'd keep having to go back to your stash, which has limited space to begin with, and kind of switch and swap out. It's just not very intuitive. Consumables too include these keys, the Nightmare Sigils. These are what open the Nightmare Dungeons. Again, you can't differentiate from them, and you accumulate these pretty fast. Now, you can always salvage them or save some of them, but again, if you save some of them, you're taking up stash space. It's just a catastrophe. It really needs to be improved, and what I think a good solution would be is just to add a separate elixirs tab here. That way you could have a consumables and elixirs. A lot of people have asked for a gem tab too. Now I'll be honest, that one I don't think is quite as important because as the game goes on, you'll only be gemming things every so often. But as you level up, I can see the necessity for it. So maybe they could add, a few gem slots that do all of the combinations, maybe 7 gems at a time you could store. But I think stash space and consumable space really needs to be expanded upon. This is a game in the Diablo universe that's really built upon accumulating items that you'll need to use for extractions later. This absolutely has to be changed and improved. More consumable space, more stash space. Number 5. Add gear set swapping. Because right now in Diablo 4, you have no options whatsoever to change your gear in a click. And that's just unacceptable. Right now there's a wardrobe that lets you customize the colors and looks of your characters, which is great. That system is fine. But they need to add a new tab within this that functions similarly to the armory system in Diablo 3. That was a really easy to use system that you could just walk up to, click your armory set, and automatically everything would be swapped. This needs to encompass the skills, the Paragon boards, and your gear, and your expertise if you're a barbarian. This is a simple way to navigate between sets very easily because right now I can't tell you a bigger disincentive to switching things up and trying new builds than the lack of this kind of functionality. Basically, if I was a Whirlwind Barb and I wanted to try the Hammer of the Ancients build, I would have to literally re-roll all of my gear, keep it somewhere else in my stash tab, which the space is already super limited as it is, and basically just swap every single item. Not only would I have to do that, but I would have to redo my entire Paragon board because different specs take advantage of different glyphs and Paragon cells in different ways. So there's really not a good way to do this very quickly to the point where swapping your spec, even if there's a spec, that's exploratory or a spec that's just straight up more powerful that you want to go to, you could be taking hours just to change your character to do that. This is a feature that absolutely has to be added. Put it into the wardrobe, make it just like the armory functionality in D3, and you'll have players experimenting with builds a lot more. It's true that players gravitate toward the builds they perceive to be more powerful, and right now there is probably only a few for each class. For Barbarian, it is Hammer of the Ancients and Whirlwind, maybe Thorns. Rend is alright. But for other classes, they're in a similar boat. We're already kind of constrained as it is with a few specs, but the game basically systematically constrains us even more by not allowing us to do easy gear swapping. And that's something that really needs to be changed. Number 4, make enchant a little cheaper on the gold. Because take a look at this. Last night I got this ring. It's a pretty good ring. I have now the 4 stat rolls that I want on it, including critical strike damage, but the critical strike damage is a pretty low roll. And right here, I think I rolled it 3 times with enchant, and right now, just to enchant it again is over 1 million gold. And the Forgotten Souls, I think it's totally fine to have those in the game as requirements for this to encourage you to do the Helltide. The Helltide's fine, but the money is crazy. Right now, I can do this to see if I get it. I don't get it, so I'm going to do no change, and it goes to 1.5 million. So we're going to try it again, and I still don't get the critical strike damage roll. I know that this is random. There's a lot of ring affixes, but this becomes cost prohibitive after a while. So you can see 3 rolls there. I didn't get it. It's up to 2 million. Right here, don't have it again. So this is crazy. And if you look at some of my other items, like this weapon, this is up to 3.8 million. And right now, to get 3.8 million, it takes me, I think, it would take me around 7 dungeons to do that, maybe 6 dungeons if I sold all of the items that I got from that dungeon. This becomes totally cost prohibitive. I see what they were going for. They didn't want to make it like Diablo 3, where eventually money became almost meaningless and you always had tons of gold because you didn't really spend it on much other than the gem upgrade thing on the rifts. But I think that there could be a happy medium where they made enchant cost exactly half of what it costs today in terms of gold. Keep the material cost the same outside of the gold. The crafting materials are totally reasonable for it, but have the amount. And that will make it a lot easier to kind of gear up, itemize a little bit better without having to do, in some cases, I have a weapon that would cost 7 million to re-roll. That would, I think, cost about 14 dungeons worth of time for a single one. Number 3. Show the mystery chest locations on the map in Helltide events. So most of you may know that the Helltides are there to farm cinders, and with those cinders you open chests, and those chests have a chance to drop, among other things, Forgotten Souls. In fact, it's the only place in the game where Forgotten Souls drop. But what you might not know is that in those Helltide events, there's also mystery chests that spawn at the very beginning of the Helltide and 30 minutes into the Helltide. These mystery chests cost 175 cinders, and those are by far the most cost-effective chests to open. They often contain 4 to 5 legendary items, additional crafting materials, and often Forgotten Souls as well. But the problem is they don't show up on the map until you get close to that location. You can kind of see it on your mini-map. So I don't know if Blizzard is trying to go for kind of like a secretive thing, that these are supposed to be like a special kind of chest that no one wants to be able to show on the map. But it doesn't really make sense, because what people just end up doing, the player base, is just going into Discords and just sharing this information with each other anyway. So they're just going outside of the game to get this information if they really want it. It's not something they're having fun to stumble upon. So it just behooves the developers to just add this into the minimap. It makes it a lot easier on the player base, and we don't have to just constantly keep different tabs open on our browsers and such. Number 2. Alter kill all enemy phases in dungeons. So if you're like me and you've been playing a lot of nightmare dungeons, chances are that you're sick to death of these kill all enemy phases, which seem to appear in a third to maybe a half of the dungeons in the game. These just get insane after a while. Most of the time these enemies are spread out, there isn't a lot of density in some of these maps, and it wouldn't be a problem if it was just 50 enemies, but oftentimes there's 200 to 300 enemies in some of these maps, and it just gets insane. Now, some of the players have just gone to the lengths of, when you get a nightmare sigil with one of these dungeons, you automatically just salvage it and create a new one. So if that's what Blizzard's going for, they're getting it here, because this just gets insane. So this could be solved in a few ways. One is just to eliminate them completely. You could do that. You could eliminate them and replace them with, say, kill 50 enemies in this stage and then move on. That would be a happy medium that wouldn't make a lot of players upset. Another option would be replace the enemies with bigger, more rare enemies. So there's ways around this that could be much more fun, but right now the player base is hating these dungeons. They're replacing them with others. They're simply not doing these dungeons in some cases, and that just shouldn't be. This is supposed to be a fun gaming mechanic, and there's better ways to do it than this. Number 1, implement an item filtering system. So you get a lot of items in Diablo 4. And you get even more items the more you grow in level in Diablo 4, especially rare and magic items in dungeons. And they're so plentiful that they just end up being kind of a chore. You end up having to take a look at all the items. You can just pick them all up like this while you're killing enemies, and maybe you'll have a full inventory like a third of a way through the dungeon, and then you'll have to make a decision. Do I drop items? Do I look at all of them now and decide what to drop then? Do I port back to town? All of this wastes time when the gameplay really should be at the heart of Diablo 4. So there needs to be an item filtering system. At a bare minimum, there should be two overarching ways to filter items. Number one, bare minimum, be able to filter between sacred and ancestral legendaries. This is the most important one. There gets to be a point in the game where I'm not even really necessarily needing to pick up sacred legendaries or sacred rares, and the only reason I do is when I need gold. I sell them for gold. But chances are, by the time you're grinding enough, you won't even need them for that. So the ability to only see ancestrals on the ground would be perfect. Other way, bare minimum, that you should be able to use filtering for items is item power level. There should be a slider within the UI that lets you set a threshold for which, under that number, no legendaries or rares drop in that categorization. This would be so incredible and save so much time. I can't express enough how much this is needed. This is the number one thing that players of this game really need to have, so that we're not constantly wasting time in non-gameplay mathematical, analysis. So this is the most important change, if you were to ask me, that Blizzard can implement to fix and make Diablo 4 better. Item filtering, absolutely no questions about it. So there it is. Those are the 7 things I think Blizzard must do in the next patch to fix Diablo 4 to make it great. Did you think I missed any though? If so, just put them in the comments below. Please like the video and subscribe for future Diablo 4 content.